What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Fifth Factor, hosted by yours truly, David Lee and Ahmed Jama, aka at Slip the Screen. You can find me at DLeeFor3 on all platforms. Man, Ahmed, I'm excited, man. Like I think we're gonna be bringing something pretty new to the draft space, and I'm really excited to be doing this with you, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been admiring the work you do as being an Atlanta native, like the work you do with the Hawks and on that, and seeing you work and move into the draft space. I mean, yeah, I'm excited to get. I feel like we're going to be bringing the best of both worlds. The film analysis, definitely taking more of an analytical approach. But yeah, it's going to be good. It's a good class, man.
Yeah, I mean, and Hawks fans will know this, but they've been tuned in a lot earlier than at any point. I think in terms of any sort of draft cycle, and I think that of course, again, we're both from Atlanta. I've been a Hawks fan my whole life. That particular trade that they made got me really invested into the draft earlier. But I think from us, just from a general desire to want to be more accurate and more informed about the draft, like I think that this is going to be inevitable, right? You kind of have to start doing the work a lot earlier, even if there are things you got to tease out during non-conference play, whether it's competition or role context, stuff like that. But I mean, I really enjoyed keeping up with this class a lot earlier. It helps that they're very engaging, but I think that we both have some pretty interesting takeaways to these first couple games, first 10 or so games.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think we're seeing the league, you especially being more NBA centric, at least to start your like basketball career or basketball endeavor. I think we're kind of seeing the league changes mirror a lot of what we're seeing in college basketball and like looking at the prospects through those lenses and like how we see a lot of these guys developing or adapting to the new NBA. I don't know. I'm excited, man. I think it's a lot of different like conversation points to be had about these guys.
And I'm hoping that most of the people watching this will be coming from our own respective audiences. So hopefully they're familiar with the work we do. But for those of us who are not familiar with our stuff, we definitely want to start off with some introductions. So I'm David Lee. I go by DLeeFor3 on pretty much every platform: Substack, TikTok, Instagram. I started off very Hawk-centric in my basketball coverage. I'm a accredited media reporter for the Hawks as well. So I attend those games, do press conferences and things of that nature. And I cover the Hawks on the Hawks From Room podcast and on my Twitter mainly. But as Ahmed mentioned, like I've kind of gravitated more towards the draft, and I just have a real big passion for NBA and basketball in general. And so whether it's on my Substack or it's on Twitter, YouTube, whatever it may be, or my website that I'm going to be launching soon, which I'll definitely be plugging in, and between this and the ins and outs of the show, that's really where my biggest passion is, and it's using data to make things digestible for an audience that I don't feel like the NBA does a good job of utilizing their data or explaining their data or contextualizing the game in a way that really holds it in the type of like chess battle that I think the basketball should be viewed as. And I think that we've gotten away from, appreciating the more granular aspects of basketball in general. So I think I want to bring that to people using film, using data, using storytelling. And that's really my biggest passion. So the draft is just, in my opinion, the most rewarding way to merge all that, right? Because it's the projection, it's teasing out like what's actually valuable and what isn't. Like that really fascinates me more than anything. But definitely, please let the people know what you do. Let them be a little bit more familiar with what you do.
Yeah, so Ahmed Jama. Like I said, I'm from the Atlanta area, like D. Lee. Primarily, I'm kind of the opposite. I've always been a basketball fan, like Hawks fan starting off, but definitely always kind of found myself attracted to or gravitating towards the draft and draft prospects. And like David had mentioned about the narrative and tying the narrative of the NBA together with like statistical analysis and strategic analysis. And for me, it was always just tracking the league through, the influx of new players, and that kind of built the narrative, seeing guys kind of ascend through the ranks and go from unheralded prospects to, the faces of our league. I mean, that's kind of what's defined, especially at this era of the NBA. You see a draft or not a draft, but we see the finals this past season, and you see, the headline guys, the marquee guys, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton, dudes no one really expected to be in that at
Right.
this juncture of their career, kind of being the faces of the league. But yeah, and I've always been, gravitating towards the draft, like I said, and my relationship with the NBA or basketball kind of advanced, my understanding of the draft kind of progressed, and just getting in the nitty gritty, whether it be through tape or data analysis. And it's kind of been a circuitous route. Now I'm doing some work with in the G League, working for the Mexico City Capitanes, doing analytics and scouting, and a lot like personnel focused. But yeah, I just love through trying to find, who could potentially be the best 12th man on a roster all the way to obviously the guys we're going to talk about at the top of this, with the top three, pretty vaunted and long regarded top three.
Yeah, and I love your point about the kind of find those unheralded prospects, because that's where the value is at this point. I think that maybe a decade ago, like it was a lot easier to to miss guys like this, but now with the type of data that's available, the film that's available, I think the ability to really identify and pinpoint those sleepers earlier on in the cycle is a great sign of a great evaluator, and I think that you have a good track record of that, and hopefully some of the guys we talk about today will have that same sort of pedigree.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said a handful of times. I think it was like the tag word of this past season, basketball transitioning into a weak-link sport.
Yeah.
And we see guys at the back end of rotations making significant contributions in high leverage moments in the playoffs. I mean, last year, that's what defined the Pacers, and obviously the Thunder have been able to do what they do because they have quality 12 deep. So kind of finding those guys that could be the margin wins of the future. That's something I'm very excited to do, along with, talk about the headliners.
Yeah, I'd be remiss to not mention this as well, but the name, the fifth factor, comes from something that I think we both value in basketball, which is the uptick in transition influence and frequency. And to your point too, like depth is a big part of that. And the reason why the Thunder are so oppressive defensively is because they're constantly cycling guys. They might be pressing 60, 80 feet. They're going to be very up folks' grill, whatever it may be, but that requires having playable guys on that 12th, 13th, even sometimes 15th roster spot. And so the name of the fifth factor comes from a concept that was developed by Dean Oliver, who is the grandfather of basketball analytics. He created the four factors, which is effective field goal percentage, offensive rebounding percentage, turnover percentage, and free throw rate. And he isolated those four variables as the most consequential sort of like drivers of winning for basketball teams. And so I started thinking about the fifth factor as transition influence, and particularly in this age of basketball. And I think that in general, like the fifth factor as a metaphor, like, okay, we have these established baselines for what's a good NBA player or what drives impact, but like, where are these outlier traits or what are these other ways that guys can do things in different ways? It's kind of how I wanted to, and I think we both shared like how we want to structure this show around, and I think it fits what we want to do pretty aptly. But yeah, I want to get that out the way. I want to make sure that everyone's familiar with what we do and what we value. And I think that as we go on through this episode, you'll start to understand the traits that we value in prospects as well. So we're not going to say it explicitly, I would imagine, but I know my philosophy is up on my site. I know that you have it documented as well. So we'll definitely direct people to those links in the description below. And I don't mean to gloss over the top three when I say this, but I do think they've been discussed at length. But I don't want to leave them without being touched upon. So do you have any thoughts that you want to share before we start getting into the actual like film breakdown? Because I don't believe we have any cut-ups outside of one guy in that top three, in that consensus top three.
Yeah, I mean, they've been discussed ad nauseum at this point. Like you said, I mean, it's so interesting. We're at a point talking about analytics, and primarily through obviously like college basketball, NBA, like a prospect lens. But I mean, it's the focus on analytics is extended all the way to one of my focuses, or I like to consider one of my areas of expertise, grassroots basketball. And these guys have been documented. I mean, literally between the three of them, probably over 300 games, a sample size that dwarfs what they've done in college so far. Like, these are probably some of the most documented high school players in the history of, American grassroots basketball, which is so interesting because we're going to get to obviously tape wise, even like the film. I mean, Cam Boozer's probably played on ESPN upwards of 30, 40 times in his high school career, which is crazy to think of, that he's been known, obviously being the son of an NBA player, he's been known for a long time, but I mean, they're known commodities. And now we're kind of trying to really calibrate our expectations towards, I think all of them are going to be, obviously, they're going to change the trajectory of whatever franchise they land on. And kind of trying to understand to what extent that may be and what shape that kind of influence may take is going to be what's so interesting about them. I was doing a podcast for the rights to Ricky Sanchez. I was a Hawks trader, I was doing a Sixers-centric podcast, or a Sixers network. But we did best prospects outside of the NBA draft, like kind of, preseason content fodder in like August or something. And it was including, it was this incoming freshman class and then some younger guys. And I think it was actually anyone that never mind. It wasn't just, sorry, this is like, going on a tangent, but it wasn't just outside of, it was everyone. It was like NBA included, and the number one overall prospect we had, including the NBA guys, like the recent draftees, including, Cooper Flagg and those dudes, was Cameron Boozer. And I thought highly of him at that point. I mean, it's hard to argue with the resume he had. And then number two I had at that time was Darren Peterson. And then I think Coop was third. But I mean, the dominance, the sustained dominance and just kind of categorical, like, production that these guys have had, it's hard not to love.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember too, like, even before I was really paying attention to guys pre-NCAA, like, I was watching those Knight Riders games on, like, the NBA app, like when it was Boozer and Wilson going, when they were playing together in the AAU. And I think that kind of just speaks to the breadth that he had as a prospect. So I expected that he would have a little bit more respect. And I do think that Twitter can be an echo chamber of some of those things. Like, I do think that's like the ultimate platform to farm divisiveness. So you're going to be fed stuff that you disagree with. But I do think it's still fascinating to me that despite this long track record and despite this historically large sample size of dominance, there's still questions about him. And I think that it's a bit reductive to reduce him to just say, hey, he's not an NBA athlete, or he's not going to get this game off, or he's just abusing weaker comp. Because, I mean, whether it's the free throw stuff or the touch or the processing, like, I remember Matt Powers had put up a tweet that I really liked where he's basically saying the percentiles of where Boozer's statistics rank on guys who are 6'8" or higher, like 98th percentile in assist volume, 97 to 96 in assist to turnover. But it's also like when you compare him to guards too, like, he has the playmaking profile of a guard as a freshman who's 6'10", 250. And he's also crazy efficient at the free throw line. He's generating stuff at offensive rebounds, and then we don't have to even really mention. And then that's without mentioning, like, this Duke context isn't great. Like, I think, like, I would have loved to have seen him on last year's team, or even, if they would have mixed up the guard room a little bit more. Or I think Caden had a better game as of late too, so maybe he'll get a little bit more burn. But I mean, it's not a good context. And he's still by far the most productive player, not just as a freshman or among freshmen, but as in this class in particular. Like, anyone who's on the draft radar, like, no one has been able to match his production. There's not that huge drop against comp either. So, I mean, obviously there's still things to monitor. He's not a perfect prospect, but I think he's about as close as you can get. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching him. I think JQ's debut was like a breath of fresh air for me. Very validating, because I had him third before the cycle started officially, like, in terms of the NCAA season. And I think that he's like my perfect dream big man. Like, if I could take all the traits that I wanted and I put it in a big, it would probably be him, especially when you consider the age. Outside the free throw shooting, like, that would be nice if he could, get to 70, 75%. But I mean, when we talk about the ability to, seal in transition, he's generating extra possessions on the glass. He's able to make positive decisions out of the short roll. And again, another bad offensive context, but his immediate sort of insertion into the lineup. I mean, Kentucky had nothing without him. Offense terrible. And in 17 minutes, you see his massive impact because he's so transcendent on defense, and he has that baseline stuff on offense. Like, he transitioned so well from 4 to 4, and he was really covering ground a lot and got up to his top speed a bit as well. And I was like, okay, well, it looks like he trusted me. So I really like what I saw from him as well. And then we had some stuff on AJ, so I won't touch on him too much just now. And then I think for Darren Peterson, like, I think he's, of course, the calf, I think it's fair to wonder how bad it is, because I didn't watch a ton of him, to be like candid, pre-NCAA, but like, I knew that he was more dynamic in terms of his scoring profile, his ability to put pressure on the rim, and that hasn't exactly been there, that burst off the line, whatever it may be. But I think between those four guys, like, I'm still there with Boozer. I'm inching higher with JQ. Like, I really don't see why he wouldn't be able to contend for 2, at least for me, because I think that the things that make him special are like very easily like carried out throughout the entire season. Like, the mobility, the motor, the defensive influence, and how much drastically different Kentucky looks with him on the floor. Like, I think he's going to have crazy on-offs. He's going to be extremely impactful. So it might be hard for me to keep him. I mean, even maybe out of contention for number 1. I don't know.
That's spicy. It's coming in spicy already.
Yeah, but I think, of course, like, I mean, Booz is there, but I just think I value so much of what JQ does.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's cool to like branch out into someone like JQ, because we've branded this as the big three, but I think there are a
Yeah.
handful of contenders. For me personally, it was like the tier. I think I have Boozer and Darren Peterson just ahead of
me
the
too.
pack, and then the rest of those guys, whether it be JQ, AJ. I don't necessarily buy the Caleb Wilson top 3 talks, but I mean, it's hard to argue with the production to this point. And a guy we're going to discuss in a little bit is a guy that I'm very excited to get into, Kingston Flemings. Someone that the very first board we did for Switch Theory, another outlet that I write for, we had to do preseason boards, or not preseason boards. It was like the very first board after 8 games or so, and I had Kingston third there, which may have been jumping the gun a little bit, but from what I've seen from him so far and kind of a lot of the discussion points going into the season, I did not think the context was very amenable to his play style, or it's just unfriendly towards guards in general, and he's well exceeded any possible expectation I could have reasonably had for him. So I definitely have him in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead and hop into the tape, man. Like, you ready?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to skip ahead a little bit to get to the Kingston stuff. Yeah. Okay, cool. You can see it?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so with Kingston, get this. It's really just the pick and roll operation so far. I mean, he's very much, and he's been blitzed a lot, I feel like, in pick and roll so far. And the decision making, the processing, again, Houston, it's near 10th percentile in adjusted tempo. They don't run a lot. They're 10th percentile in 3-point attempt rate. They don't shoot a lot of threes. They don't have a lot of spacing, but they're still a top 25 offense based off of just his creation. And you see here being hedged, and then he looks off the low man, Sebastian Williams Adams here. I think it cuts off a little bit, but looks him off towards the roller. And then you see here, it just creates an open 3 for Chris Cenac, who needs to take that shot. But, we may get into Chris Cenac a little bit later. And then it's more of the same for Kingston, and rejects the screen. They've been setting his screens a lot higher, I think, to kind of mitigate some of the handle issues that we may discuss a little bit later. But his first step is ridiculous. I think that's something that, I mean, it pops on tape. I don't think it necessarily takes, in-depth analysis to notice, but just how quickly he gets downhill, Darius Acuff trying to ice the ball screen. And, I mean, Arkansas has ball screen coverage in this game. This is the most recent game they played Saturday, where they won pretty convincingly. The ball screen coverage, the backline coverage left a lot to be desired. I mean, they're a rangier team. They played really fast. Don't necessarily have a lot of size to make up for it on the back end, but I mean, Kingston diced them up. And then you can kind of see here, Joe Tugler was going to go set the screen up there, and Kingston just gets downhill. He has a ton of space to operate. And then,
I think I like your point about the first step, because when I looked at his play types, a lot of it is like, at least on Synergy, like it's like he's kind of like 50-50 in terms of like number one play type in terms of spot ups and pick and roll ball handler, but his drive numbers are great. It looks great on tape as well. But I'm curious, like, to your point, how much does the context boost his ability to operate in pick and roll? Because I think that there's been moments too, and I think I may have the clip, but like against Ryder, like he's holding the help and finds the guy in the dunker spot. Like I think he has like real pick and roll manipulation ability. But I also wonder, like, how much can you project him as a primary when he doesn't have a ton of volume in the pick and roll, like comparable to some other guys, like whether it's Darius Acuff or like Christian Anderson, like there isn't. Of course, when he gets the ability to operate in pick and roll, I think it looks good, and I think I can buy it. But I don't know how much more I need to see, or how much more volume I need to see consistently, because this game against Arkansas was his highest pick and roll volume game yet. 12, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, since play type distribution right here, you mentioned his pick and roll ball handlers. You see basically almost chronologically, at least versus big teams, you see his pick and roll volume just kind of increasing over the course of the past few games. And I mean, obviously that's intentional with Houston, they just don't have a lot of creators otherwise, and typically their roster construct had always been fairly similar over the years. You know, they have elite ball handler, handles virtually all of the playmaking duties. Think, you know, Jamal Shed, for example.
Right.
Then they'll have movement shooters. Probably the most like notable guy to play this role translating to the NBA, Quentin Grimes. You look at Quentin Grimes, and he's still, you know, fairly limited 2-point scorer, but you look at his play type distribution in Houston, it was all off screens. He had a paltry free throw rate. I think he was sub 45% on twos. It's just the personnel kind of adjustments or the personnel accommodations you have to make for a team that's so focused on defense, having long rangey guys, having crashing offensive glass, winning like the rebounding and turnover battles. You're just not going to have a ton of you're going to have to make some compromises skill wise. And with this roster, it's interesting. It's not necessarily the case. I think this is the most skilled roster they have across the board and the aggregate field across the board. They're 25th last I checked after this Arkansas game in assist rate, which is by far the highest Houston's ever been. Typically they're, you know, 25th percentile assist rate team. And I think a large part of it's due to the guys handling the majority of their playmaking duties. It's Flemings. I mean, I think to have a 30 assist rate with relatively low pick and roll volume is pretty astounding, and just how capable he is of creating. Now, stuff like this, I don't know how you feel about it, but I mean, if I zoom back a little bit, you see here, he has just acres of space, I feel. And I think he could definitely, this is where we're going to talk about the free throw rate eventually. I feel like this is where he has room to gain. And you look at right here, Billy Richmond, 6'6". You have 6'2" DJ Wagner, and you have 6'6" Carter Knox. This is not exactly the most formidable back line.
Right.
And Kingston just passes it off early, does create, you know, a good shot. This is Emmanuel Sharp over there, who's a great three-point shooter, but still I think this is where you kind of want to see, if you're going to play as a point guard, as a true point guard, that's where you kind of want to see some gains made. And then with Kingston, again, they've built in so much kind of, again, account for his handle limitations. Like they're running a lot of these like Iverson actions to kind of clear out a corner, clear out the wing. So Kingston will have room to operate and then just remove some nail help. And then he has a pretty good amount of space to attack downhill here. But still, with Kingston, he's just going to struggle a little bit initiating contact. And it's just, I think you'd mentioned it, a lot of these advantages or a lot of the rim pressure is kind of manufactured at this point. But still, he has great touch around the rim.
100%.
And yeah, they use this Iverson, whether it be Iverson or ghost screen action, a pretty good bit. And then you're going to see it's like an Iverson follow clearing out this side, and then Kingston just gets downhill.
Yeah, they'll have him run like that Iverson cut too sometimes, and then have him flow into an angle pick and roll. And I think what intrigues me about him, and when you mention the context, it feels like a lot of his passes will kind of be like not necessarily advantage creation, but just like kicking it to that immediate next pass on the wing. And I don't think that's a sign of him like not being able to see those angles or not being comfortable like getting more downhill. But I think it's honestly like for Houston's offense, an above the break sharp three off the catch isn't the worst look, you know, like in context of like what they usually able to generate. So I try to give him grace in terms of that. I don't think he's like, I don't think he's like the best pick and roll manipulator in the class or anything like that. But I think that a lot of the decisions he makes are kind of because this is a limited offense. And this is, to your point, this is still one of the best that they've had. But like, you know, when the ball finds Cenac, like it's not always a good possession. But I also think that some of his assist stuff is a bit juiced because Sharp and Uzan will take those threes, you know, with about like 3 feet of space that a lot of guys wouldn't on most collegiate teams as well. Like they're not exactly like real playmaking. I don't want to discount it, but like, cause it's, you know, it's still reading the help and all that, but it's not like manufacturing looks. I don't see a lot of that, but again, with a 30 assist rate, And the fact that he's taking care of the ball, like instead of 2.5, it's just a turnover. And it's not like they've played nobody. And it's encouraging to see that volume creep up more and more, because I thought he was able to get wherever he wanted for the most part against Arkansas.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big part of it, like here you see this is probably his least successful game of the season so far against Syracuse, and he just misses the window here for a little pocket pass. And again, I feel like this is where he just can't make these like directional decisions off a live dribble. Like it's just kind of pick a lane and go. And it's not an issue with prospects like him that have been so like undeniably productive so far. A lot of the technical things I want to take is almost like low-hanging fruit, just real opportunity to grow. Whereas you'll see a lot of these point guards are coming in a lot more refined. That may not necessarily be the case, but here draws a foul. And yeah, I mean, the Arkansas game was easily his best. And I don't want to dismiss too much of it, because Arkansas is a good team and they're going to probably end up being a top 15, 20 team this season. And then, just using these ghost screens, that's just kind of rough defense from Malik Thomas, and Darius Acuff, known for a lot. And we'll probably go over him as well at some point too. I was pretty impressed with him in this game. But yeah, and you kind of see when Kingston isn't going, what can happen to the offense. They can just flounder. I was really keeping an eye on going into the season was how that playmaking responsibility between him and Uzan was going to shake out. Uzan was like Milos Uzan was like a fringe prospect this past season, and I'd fully anticipated him to kind of step into like a primary playmaker role. But how decisively and early on in the season that playmaking responsibility has been shifted over to Kingston is just shocking. And then this is where for all the half-court issues, in transition, semi-transition, the playmaking he's able to do is just unbelievable. And then, but again, handle issues going back in time, going back to high school. He played for a public school, so Kingston didn't necessarily face the best competition there. But in games like this, where they're playing Lou High, one of the better high school teams in the country last year, I think they made the semifinals at Geico, with a plethora of, legitimately most colleges would kill to have the caliber perimeter defenders this Lou High team had. I mean, you have guarding the ball right here is Dylan Mingo. He's a top 5 prospect in the 2026 high school class, will be in next year's draft. Caden Mingo, who I'm a massive fan of, freshman at Penn State right now, doing very well.
Yep.
And then Nigel James is not on the court right now, but still a vaunted perimeter defender. And Kingston, again, just doesn't have the refinement. And again, even going back to high school, using that kind of Iverson screen to clear out a side, and Mingo just kind of swallows him up. He has a turnover. He had 7 turnovers in this game. And then attacking off the catch, again, kind of gets him. It's a good pass, good interior pass, but gets himself in trouble. And those middle third advantages that I think are kind of separate good from great primary options, initiators, whatever archetypal title you want to give them. Here, Kingston attempts to punch a gap that doesn't really exist, and then just has his handle dug out by Nigel James. And again, I don't know how reasonable it is, honestly, to expect the guy to create against like that kind of a shell. But if we're talking top 3 in the draft, and then here gets downhill. What do you think of the process on this one? On this clip right here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember looking at this particular clip. He does have a tendency to kind of like take those pull-up middies, which I don't have a problem with. Particularly here, like I think that because of the way that Gortat screen comes, there's not really a chance to snake it around for a layup, and I think that a floater would be nice. I don't think I've seen him take a floater.
No,
yet.
Not really.
I don't think it's really in his bag just yet. But I think that if you're going to take that shot, it's either that's really the only shot he can take there, or he can bring it back out and reset the offense. And I'm kind of like, I'm fine with this in early offense. I think that if Tugler runs down at a different angle, maybe he seals him off a little bit better. But I'm fine with that shot in particular.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Highway screen isn't necessarily all the way there. Is there any other clips with Kingston you want to go over? Anything specific?
I think you covered most of them, man. Like,
Okay.
I don't want to be too redundant with him, but I think I see enough as a playmaker to say, okay, this is a guy that I would feel pretty comfortable with, like running a good amount of my offense through, but I'm not quite there yet to say like this is, to your point, like it's a primary. You mentioned Acuff. For as much as I did not rate him and kind of still am a little bit skeptical, like he's actually like probably the best pick and roll player in the country right now. He's at 1.24 points per possession, which is outside of Josh Dent. Like that's the best efficiency of anyone to run 100 pick and rolls, including passes, this season. And Christian Anderson is like the only other guy that has, or Trey Donaldson too, but like those three are kind of like the only other guys. Fryline a little bit as well, but I think that with Acuff, like so much of it is I don't know. I don't really like the playmaking as much, but I feel like the scoring has been like surprisingly pretty good. I do think he blows tires at the rim a lot, and I don't have that same concern with someone like with Kingston, just because of kind of the upper stratospheres that he can reach a little bit with his size. And even if it isn't as consistently there, like I would rather bet on someone like Kingston's scoring process translating as opposed to Acuff. But again, this is 10 games into the season. Like if Acuff continues to be this prolific as a pick and roll creator, and we continue to see these, whether it's the pick in the spots issue or not always embracing contact, like he's at like a 30 free throw rate, right? Like Kingston Flemings, something like that.
Yeah. And it's been climbing up. I think in top 100 comp, it's actually higher than overall. I think he's right under 40. And something I think I'd set into, funny enough, a group chat that we're both in, the history of Houston guards. I think since Kelvin Sampson had been there, which is I think exactly a decade now, he'd had, as far as guards with even comparable on-ball volume to Kingston, he had maybe 2 guards above a 35 free throw rate. So Kingston hovering around there. I'm really the 2 numbers, like free throw rate, huge, that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the free throw rate and the rim to non-rim 2-point volume, just kind of what that shot distribution looks like inside the arc. If he's able to kind of create those early offense advantages, get downhill and get to the rim outside of the half court and balance that scoring, it's kind of hard to find any arguments with his profile so far. And we haven't even really gone over the defense, which has been really impressive, just like creating events consistently. He's just so springy an athlete. I just don't think something you and I especially are acutely aware of are kind of the trade-offs you make when you have a smaller primary, and defensively especially. And I'm not going to say any names here, but with Kingston, I'm not going to say he's going to be an all defense guy. I don't think he's going to, just his build, and I don't think he's going to be, and he doesn't have exemplary length. I think last he been measured, he was a neutral wingspan basically. I don't think he's going to be an all defense guy, but just being a neutral defensively with all he can do on offense is huge for that role. And it's, at this point, I probably had the least questions with him outside of the top 2 guys.
Yeah, and I also want to touch on Cenac a little bit, like while we were on the topic of Houston. He's someone that, like, and I mean this in the most derogatory sense possible. Like he reminds me of Sarr.
Okay.
And he reminds me of Sarr in like all the areas that I didn't like about Sarr. The free throw rate is just so low. Yeah. And at 6'10", especially with, even with the amount of offensive rebounds he's getting, because he didn't get on the glass on the offensive side in high school at all. I think he had like 28 and 250 high school possessions. This year he's at 22 and like 120, 130. So that, I got to give him props for that. But I don't see any interest in setting screens from him. Like everything's a slip. He looks to float around for like catch and shoot 2s all the time. And like, I think his assisted rate on his non-rim 2s is like 76%, which is absurd because it's not like he has a ton of like roll man volume. It's literally him like floating over from the corner and sitting. And here's the thing, like against collegiate defenses, like that's viable, I think, because a lot of college defenses just aren't very structured in their shell. And sometimes against the zone, like you need a guy to flash middle. That's fine. Like, I think it's nice that he has that, but I just haven't seen what I wanted from him, like defensively or even like grit wise. But I think that if there's a situation that could bring that out of him, it has to be Houston, right? Like that's why I was like, okay, I didn't really expect him to get much tick because I didn't think that he was a Houston type big. it's still kind of like interesting to me that they brought him in because I mean he has 2 blocks against comp, and they were like he has 7 on the season, I think. So it's not like it's crazy, but both of those were below the rim, and they're not exactly like he's not getting the ball at the apex. I have a database of collegiate players in their final NCAA season that goes back to like 2002, right? And I took their average of their estimated wins from dunks and threes, which is like, like the premier NBA, like all in one stat. And then they have like an estimated wins, like sort of component, which is basically like how impactful, how many wins has this player added throughout the entirety of their career.
Yeah.
And for those players that were drafted in their final collegiate season, I've got an average estimated wins of 11.7 and an average career length of 4.9. The average total career estimated wins in NBA seasons for players who are at least 6'8" and posted a less than 20 free throw rate while committing more than 4 fouls per 40 was 0.22. And that's in comparison to 11 estimated wins over the overall average and then only 2 seasons played on average. And it's guys like Jordan Bell. And I think that like those types of guys are bigs that I'm very scared of. Mm-hmm. I didn't mention too the assist to turnover bad. Like if he's not putting a shot up,
and that's what it comes down to me. For me, I think Cenac, for him, he's firmly he's well outside the lottery for me, and I imagine he is with you too. For him, it's more so working into a boardable conversation. Like, is he a guy that you can realistically expect to put in your top 40, 60, however big you make your board for this season? Like, is he going to matriculate into this draft class? And I'm kind of conflicted because a part of me is wanted to take more of like an Occam's razor approach. Like, this team's so good, they're young, and like you said, this is the most interesting team in the country to me because I was skeptical going into the season.
Yep,
well documented on Finn's podcast, and I don't think that my takes on them were necessarily wrong. It's just when you have a team that's successful with so many young contributors, I kind of want to just give him the benefit of the doubt and figure it out. And anthropometrically, like, he's huge. Just having like any semblance of touch and skill he's legit center sized. I mean, is a 7'5" wingspan, standing about 6'11" in shoes. I mean, that's a big. Yeah. But the processing is just, it's so paltry. And like you said, the defense, he just, and off ball, you see some of the mistakes he makes, and you just see the kind of lapses in concentration, and it's really kind of jarring for this team. And I think maybe potentially if he is able to continue shooting and the rebounding is a real plus, I'd probably put him in the tier of player that I don't necessarily expect to be longtime NBA players, but it's kind of at a point when you're ranking guys in the 30s or 40s, it's just someone that can put together any sort of meaningful NBA career. You're expecting, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 career minutes, something like that would be amazing for someone you have around that range of the board. So I think he could work his way into that, but otherwise, I just think he's too limited a processor. The field's too limited to really capitalize on the gifts he has. Yeah.
And I think that really begs the question then, like, how much of that is amenable? Like, how much of that can be taught or learned or sort of like drawn out of someone? Because I think that this team is not going to be patient with him, I think, as the season progresses. And of course in the tournament as well. Like, if you're just not going to play,
I just don't think they have the options outside of him. I mean, you look in this Arkansas game, a large part of the reason Arkansas got back into the game was because predictably JoJo Tugler got in foul trouble. Yeah. And you see kind of the lack of depth in the front court. I mean, they have Khalifa Sacco, who's a low major transfer up, who's been kind of struggling, and Cedric Lath, who's pictured in this clip right here, another guy who is just like a spot minutes guy at the level Houston's trying to play at. And that's what I'm interested to see, man. I'm still waiting with this team because a lot of it really is just the shots have been going in. Like, you look at someone like Kingston, I'm wondering how sustainable is this shooting going to be? A lot of the offense is kind of tethered on. They don't turn the ball over a ton and they crash glass. I don't see the latter changing. I think they're still going to be good on the boards when you have guys like JoJo Tugler. You have guys like Cenac, who's been really good, but really good on the glass. But I I don't know. I think you're valid in thinking that on a championship level team, this guy probably doesn't contribute too much, but just by circumstances, he's probably going to be. He already has been thrown into the fire.
Yeah, and maybe that'll be good for him. I think that some guys respond well to that, some guys don't.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's already sort of rectified the rebounding stuff, which I think is big, because it's. I mean, he was like really bad, you know, but now he's actually productive on that end, and he's also finishing pretty much everything around the rim. To your point about the touch, and you know, if the theoretical type of player that he could be is enticing 100%. To your point again with the frame, he's not boardable for me at this point. Like I think I'm having like 45 to 50, and it's not to say that I don't think that he can be, but I just think like from what I've seen, this isn't someone I'd be comfortable selecting really at all. I think like in the second round, of course, like it just comes down to like the tools and betting on that and saying, okay, he can perform better. Again, I think he deserves some grace as well for the offensive context, although he does get the benefit of not having to orchestrate, and he's playing off of Fleming. So I think he's finishing what's being served up for him. And I do want to give him credit for that, but I have too many concerns about him otherwise. And I think that this is also a pretty good big class in my opinion. Like I kind of came into this class like, oh man, like we're the bigs, but at this point, like there's a lot of guys.
It's stacked, man. Yeah, it's stacked. There are a lot of bigs. My top 20 is, it's weird. It's feeling like it's virtually going to all be bigs and tiny guards. So
yeah, that's how I was looking at that as well. I was like, I have a lot more on here than I expected, honestly, going into the season. And I want to transition to talk about a particular big who's caught my eye like pretty early in this cycle too, like not even just NCAA.
Yes, sir.
But Steinbach is a guy that I was already pretty high on. I'm getting higher on, and that's not to say that there aren't limitations too. Like, and we'll get to that. But what I really like about him is just how many different ways he impacts the offense. Like, he runs the floor really, really well. He's going to seal early. Here, he gets the defender to try and front him. They're going to lob that over, and he just finishes before the help can come. Like, it's pretty easy for him. It was interesting because I think that he is pretty comfortable as a driver, but there's some moments where he'll just kind of like instinctually go and try to put his back to the basket. Like, I like that he catching surveys. You know, he'll take a moment to pause and read the help, but just sometimes like I want to see him be a little bit more dynamic with the way that he attacks the defense as opposed to like defaulting to putting his back to the basket. Of course, it's still viable because he's so big, but I think he's actually pretty like really interesting as a driver on certain possessions. And anytime he's contesting the shot, he's getting out and running. And also, the other thing is like Washington hasn't really played a ton of people, and I do want to see him play like against a real big who can contest him with length.
Yeah.
But even here, like when he carves out this seal, like even though he doesn't get the ball initially, just the fact that he was able to get that guy on his back creates an open dump opportunity for him. He also has, in my opinion, I think he has like real processing ability. So when he slips the screen, he's going to be reading the help. You got 3 defenders here, and they're going to be basically trying to split the difference here because they want to pinch him at the nail. And that pump fake sends both defenders recovering back out to their guys. And he's then able to put the ball on the floor and finish around the contest. And that's just it's a level of patience that I don't think you see from a lot of bigs at this age. And knowing that, okay, I can clear these guys out, no problem. And then now, you know, I'll just rely on my touch and my finesse. And I think that he also has some grab and go potential, which I think really turns him into a super dynamic offensive player. He's actually pretty fluid, and I think that he has outlier body control for his size and his weight, like a high gather. And then, you know, this is pretty good elevation for a guy who's not really considered the best athlete, and he finishes through the contact. Again, like not the best defensive competition, but I want to share this clip as well because I feel like like I mentioned, his body control is pretty good. He's going to get out as soon as that contests, and he contests that shot. And like that's, I mean, Chad Baker-Mazar, you know, he might, that's a 27-year-old contesting an 18-year-old, you know what I mean? Like, and I think I don't remember his wingspan. I thought it was like 7 foot or something like that, but like
7'1" was the last verified number.
And so like you see he's completely eating up this vertical space from Steinbach. And I think that this is something that will have to be monitored because he's not always able to out jump his lack of length. Right. Yeah. He's going to have to out touch it every time. But when you can, like, you don't see many bigs finish these types of, like, I guess, truncated or these types of shots where they've got to, like, really move the ball around midair. And I think the touch is special. I think he'll be able to shoot it at some point as well. Like, I think that he's got some real ability to be a dribble handoff hub, especially out of delay. Like, here they're going to enter the ball to him early in the offense. You're going to have this player lift as if they're coming for a handoff, and Steinbach is just going to keep it. And as soon as he feels that defender on his hip, he's going to spin back away from the help. And you see how he's able to move the ball in midair. Again, he's 6'10". Like, even the fact that he's able to get this shot off is impressive to me, because there's just not a lot of bigs I feel like can do this. You know, bring the ball up and bring it back around through the contest. I think that he compares very favorably, in my opinion, to someone like Şengün, but I also think he compares in some of the weaknesses, right? Like, he had a really bad game against Seattle U. Seattle U doesn't have, like, the bigs that should have gave him trouble around the basket, but what they do is, I've noticed that Steinbach isn't as comfortable, like, going up at the rim if he can't carve out space with his frame, or he's not dictating when he's receiving the ball. So, like, as a roller here, when he catches it and he's deep, and when he's sitting here, I think it's in the dunker, and he catches it, Seattle's just going to crowd him. And because he's not able to get that bump, and because he's not able to, you know, sort of, because he can't out explode this contest, like, he just whiffs it. And then here's another one too, where he just struggles to create the space without bumping off. So Washington's going to come the other way. You're going to watch Seattle do the same thing. They're going to crowd him. And when he can't put the ball on the floor, right, again, to bump off, because obviously, you know, if he dribbles, they're going to take it away from him. You can see how uncomfortable he is and how tough it is for him to actually create any space. I mean, this is a triple team, granted, but I think it's pretty indicative that, like, he's not really able to outlift his guys, like, crowding his space. And he has to be able to bump it to get to his whether it's his push shots or whatever it may be. I think that this reminds me a lot in some ways of, like, Onyeka Okongwu. Like, I think that Steinbach could be, like, a fully evolved Onyeka. Like, the way Onyeka is now offensively, I think that's a reasonable outcome, if not more so, because he's just bigger. But where I think that he doesn't have the counter for someone like Onyeka is that he just doesn't have a hook shot, at least up to this point in his NCAA career. And that's where you sort of you have to compensate for the fact that you're not going to be able to out-jump guys. If you have great touch, then you got to be able to get to a shot without having to put your shoulder into someone, even if you're going to create that initial bump with the shoulder. I don't think he has that yet.
No, and it's interesting, man, for how dominant someone. And I agree with everything about the movement, the grab and go potential. He is ridiculous. I can't really think of many 6'11", verging on 7-foot guys with his open court fluidity. But kind of the Mendoza line for big finishing, I think actually in my database, and I'm not sure if I posted it, but literally average big finishing for any NBA player that I'd at least, as dating back to when we have NCAA play-by-play, so like 2010, is 70%. And he right now is sitting at 65%, even with a couple like very good games, which is just not that great. And pretty low assisted rate, but that's almost doubly concerning with me. It kind of reminds me of the rim profile of someone, not to pander towards your audience and continuously mention Hawks, but someone like Asa Newell, who was good at the rim, but I think a lot of it was because he was so effective on the offensive glass. It was like a lot of putbacks, so that kind of like artificially suppressed. He wasn't driving the ball that much. And although Steinbach's driving numbers, I was like surprised by. Like, they're pretty good and like on a decent volume. And that's speaking of his kind of the complexion of his like 2-point attempts. His non-rim twos, only 18 attempts. He's made half of them, but only 11% assisted, which is just like an inkling. That's like indicative of someone that can play, like can make that shift Onyeka had made, like shift out to the wing, play as more of a 4. And I imagine I have some clips on it. I don't know if you also want to touch on it as well. Once we start discussing him more as a 4, that come the rim. I mean, at the 5 as well, but his rim protection becomes more in a focus, and that's something I'm definitely kind of concerned with at this stage. But no, I agree with all the kind of warts he has currently in his games and what he's so good at.
Yeah, I think I want to mention the driving, because I think that I'm not sure how bullish you are on this, but I think he might shoot it.
No, I think it will.
Yeah.
I'm one of the more confident things.
Okay. So that's what I'm pretty sure, or I want to say I'm reasonably confident that he'll shoot it. And it's meaningful, again, because, of course, it unlocks more positional versatility. But when he's this fluid as a driver, right, like that pick and pop becomes so much more dangerous. And he's going to pop here. And this aggressive of a closeout, this ends up being a foul. But the technique here and like this is, if he doesn't come down on him, like it's going to be 2 points. And I think I have his mechanics in general, I think are pretty clean from a guy this big. Like the ball comes off his fingertips really nicely. And in general, it's the free throw stuff or it's around the rim stuff. Like I think that he's going to shoot it. And if he's going to shoot it and he's going to be an offensive rebounding guy and he's going to be a driver, then I'm really, really intrigued with the offensive stuff. I did not, maybe it's because I don't want to address it, but I didn't grab like any defensive stuff, at least for us to talk about. So like if you have that, definitely want to talk through it.
Yeah, I have a couple clips.
But I do want to show one more passing thing just because I think that, okay, he can finish at the rim relatively. I know the baseline for NBA bigs isn't quite there just yet. And I think also the fact that Washington hasn't seen a ton of comp is concerning for me. But I also think he's going to meet that baseline as a passer too. Like, if you're going to be operating at the top of the key, you got to be able to be a triple threat. I feel like, that's the best delay facilitating bigs in the league. And that's what Onyeka has added. You got to be able to dribble it. I've seen some inverted pick and roll with Steinbach that I really like. I've seen, and then the ability to pass from the top of the key is just as important. So that skip pass is easy. And then this last one too, like he gets into an elbow pick and roll with his fellow big man. They're going to run him off this. I think they're going to run it out of horns. They're going to enter it to Steinbach. They're going to have one player cut off like in a pistol action, and then they're going to have the big come and set that elbow pick and roll. And I just think that opens up a lot of possibilities, man. And now they're in a pinch alignment, and then Steinbach can sort of work and get to his left-handed sort of like floating shot. So I think that there's a lot of things that he can do offensively that have me very intrigued. I think the defensive stuff is definitely valid. I think that what things that pop out to me defensively in general, I don't think that he uses his hands very well, although he's very good spatially, but he doesn't always do a good job of like being active with his hands. And I think that's evident in the steal rate. It's evident in the block rate. He's got to be more disruptive if he's not going to be a clear positive rim protector. I'm hoping that he has the size, but I mean, we're even seeing someone like Onyeka who's super switchable, like in a bad defensive context. Like it's just tough for guys like that, right? So I think it's definitely a valid concern.
Yeah, I thought I had the Steinbach clips up. I definitely do. I can grab those real quick. But yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to the steals are so interesting because they were actually like pretty stellar when he was over in Germany.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's kind of with that. I think I've been wondering if that's more scheme related because he was a 2% steal guy in Germany, which obviously the shorter shot clock. And he was playing exclusively the 5. He wasn't really ever playing with a big, but yeah, we should open up here. Okay, cool. And yeah, this is just, again, going to the length. Like he was playing a lot more at the level. And then you see he kind of just like right there. It's a lob thrown over his head. And then just not the most vertically explosive. I mean, his mobility is phenomenal, but just off a straight vert, he's not the most impressive guy. And then obviously these are pros, but you see this kind of happening. Even this past summer when he was playing FIBA U19, he's caught with Mikael Brown driving, gets pinned up on the rim by kind of a half-hearted Maurice Brown, Gortat screen, and he's just not someone that's going to provide a ton of utility as a 5. I just kind of don't think – I think he's going to have to make the shift. And again, precocious production, a guy who's as effective, and this play was against Baylor, I think. But you see here, and then just a little late on the rotation. I think he had 4 fouls like pretty quickly in this game.
Yeah.
And not exactly a bevy of rim pressure demons on this Baylor roster. And virtually all comes down to length. Again, just like a hair late on the rotation, and then someone like him just doesn't have the margins to necessarily impact the rim here. I mean, this is Michael Rataj, who's kind of moonlighting it as a 5 because of Baylor. I think their starting big had been injured, and then he's early helping and still just kind of, even with a like well-timed rotation, actually, I don't think he's really not able physically to hold up to that kind of an attempt. And that's not to say he can't. It's not to say he can't. But again, this is where, and I think I've gotten David a little upset by the comparison I made, and it wasn't derogatory. I guess it was kind of unintentionally. But looking at someone, just trying to find analogs to someone with his rim dominance, or kind of flawed rim dominance with how effective an offensive rebounder is, but all the previously mentioned limitations. Someone like Domantas Sabonis, looking at his 6-factor history, and we're going to probably mention this a million times per episode, just looking through guys' influence and how they affect. This is what constitutes what the makeup of RAPM. And it's interesting with someone like Sabonis is DRAPM, the defensive regularized adjusted plus minus, was actually better throughout his career than offense for the most part, looking at least through like 4-year. But you look at where he like really sticks out is right here, the possession rankings, just what he's able to do on the glass. And with Hannes, the effectiveness on the glass as a rebounder in tandem with the fact that the processing, he's just a plus processor kind of. I think that is a differentiator between someone like Chris Cenac, who can crash glass. Just otherwise, anytime he's taxed with any level of decision making, it's more than likely going to end up bad. And I don't see Hannes being in that kind of a bucket. So, but Sabonis again is famously imposed roster construction limitations on his team. So, and then there were some other analogs. Someone I found really interesting historically, just someone who had been out before this, candidly, and it was probably like a somewhat flawed line of reasoning. But with Hannes, I wanted to see just guys historically who maybe were limited offensively, limited finishing wise, limited as potential defensive playmakers, but were so great possession wise, influenced the possession battle for like rebounding a ton. And Jeff Foster was someone historically who Texas State's finest, who was awesome all time. I mean, look at this. He was by Rapham.
Yeah.
This is an incredible player. And again, every impact metric we mention is going to, I feel like if we do the caveat now, we won't have to mention every episode, but all these impact metrics are going to be flawed to an extent. I don't think Foster ever played like a major minutes load, so I'm not going to say he was actually the 12th best player in the league for multiple seasons, but definitely outperformed probably what is like public perception of him because he was such a ridiculous rebounder. But again, he was a much better rim protector than Hannes plans to profile. So I don't necessarily know if I see this in Hannes' future moving forward. And then kind of what probably came off as slander to David. And I hope him or any Hannes enthusiasts don't take this too personally. But if he doesn't necessarily have Hannes isn't able to capitalize or isn't able to make significant strides as a finisher, if he ends up being pigeonholed to the 5, because, and this is like his tail end outcomes, I think, if he doesn't end up shooting and rim protection doesn't come through. I think Enes Kanter is someone who was in the league for a while and was like a capable player. I mean, you see here, he's like kind of a middle of the road. Like his peak 4-year RAPM was like 266, which is like a bang average player. Such pronounced strengths, but really wasn't positive in any other area. And I think Hannes has enough positives and has produced just so extensively to this point that I don't want to doubt him. But I do think this is what prevents me from really putting him extremely high, because I do think this is going to be preventative to him necessarily. And something I thought was even crazier was looking at what had been their strengths or what had common comparison points in their careers at the same juncture. Both of them at U18 Euro. You look at someone like Enes, who dominated. I mean, 42 PER. It's like the impact metric Real GM uses. It's just nuts. Like that's really crazy. And I think it was number one at this competition. You look at it, 22 offensive rebound rate is insane. And Hannes, like a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities. Had, again, ridiculous total rebound, a little worse than Enes. PER a little worse than Enes. But again, this is just what I want to see for the remainder of the season. Can he get a decent steal rate? Can he just anything that would indicate that he has the mobility to play out on the perimeter without like really crippling your lineup construction or lineup malleability? But yeah, that's kind of maybe more conservative take on Hannes and where I stand on him now. But I agree with David. He's at this point, just how effective he's been, it's really hard to argue with. And I mean, what does he have, like a 17 offensive rebound rate at this stage? Yeah. Being 19, doing that against a grown men effectively is absurd.
I think it's a fair analog, and I think that if that, like, that's just not a viable center in today's NBA.
Yeah,
a candidate outcome isn't. And I think that I value the defensive impact so much from a center that you really have to be special for me to excuse like a level of defense. Like, I don't think that he's Derek Queen level, but obviously, like, a big reason why I was tentative with Derek Queen is because I really did not the defense, of course, but also too, like, the offense didn't seem as translatable to me. And I think that I should have bet a little bit more on the outlier there. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to be wrong. I'm not saying I'm wrong yet, but that was an unbelievable driver for a big man. I'm not saying Hans is the same way, but I'm saying the shades of what he can do, whether it's on the glass as a driver, picking and popping, that is something that I really value. So, like, I love his offensive skill set. Now it's about, like, is he big enough / mobile enough to at least be neutral? Because I think even like a Sabonis outcome is still not a guy that I'd like to take lottery, just because, to your point, like, what having Sabonis on your team does to your overall roster. But I do want to say too that RAPM in general will always reward guys for being great rebounders, just because of, and this is come to like the dismay of a lot of NBA fans because they don't value rebounding as much, but you got to be able to end possessions. You got to be able to generate possessions. Yusuf Nurkic is another guy who's like, he's bigger than the Steinbach, but like, he's like one of the, like, if in terms of, again, public perception and like how the metrics rate him, like, that's like a top 30, top 40 player like last couple of years. And it's because he's so big, but like, I think he only has a 7'2" wingspan. I want to say Hans was like 7'1",
like that. Yeah, 9'1" standing reach is what.
Yeah,
he last minute.
So of course now Nurkic is a massive dude, like, he's huge, and because he's so physically strong, I think he can overcome some of that. But if Steinbach can give me, I don't know, maybe 10 pounds, but without losing too much of the mobility, I think that he'll be able to be an anchor off the strength of his rebounding. And I don't think you could be a negative defender and be a poor rebounder. That's where, like, some guys, like, Brandon Clark's pretty good, but like more of those like tweener guys, like, they haven't had the most success. Provided that I think he can shoot, I feel pretty good about his outcome. Like, I think, like, the more we have this conversation, I'll probably keep him a little bit higher, a little bit lower from where I have him right now, just because I think, like, those are so viable outcomes. But I think I'd be relatively confident saying, like, I would be, if that's like his lower tail end, then I'd say, like, I'd feel pretty good about him being closer to his median outcome, which I think the median is, like, as I mentioned, like an Onyeka with like actual potential to be center size. We'll have to see. I think it'll be really interesting to see what they look like against comp, because, again, I don't think they've really seen much. And the flaws are pretty obvious with him too, which is the other thing. Like, other teams can crowd him. You know, like, it's not like it's in a huge matchup thing. So we'll be keeping a lot of eyes on him for sure. And I agree with the steal percentage too. Like, he could defensive play make himself out of like these concerns too. Like, I think Şengün, to his credit, like, worked really, really hard on the defensive end, but it became to the point where, like, Houston could play him at like the at the top of the zone and trap inputs Curry. And, you know, you need Adams on the back line to do that, to bring your big all the way out. But like, I haven't seen that from Steinbach at all. Like, whether it's the disruption or the processing speed or the mobility, like, he doesn't have that. And that, I think that's what like prevents him. That's what makes him a little bit closer to like an Onyeka than a Şengün.
And for all the kind of concerns I've raised so far, let me just say, someone landing, or more than likely landing somewhere on the Cantor to Sabonis spectrum, is almost always going to be a guy worth swinging on in the lottery. That's another thing. For like how low I may come off as him, again, just precocious production, someone this age that has produced it every. I mean, he, again, not the best stat we typically use, much better, but in PER, they're kind of in the German league, BBL last year, he was number 1 in the league at 18 years old. So it's hard to knock him too far, but I think the production, he's kind of a guy that's tailor-made to just be a BPM monster, so that I do want to kind of pump the brakes on. I could definitely see him popping up on, 5, 6, 7 on some people's boards.
100%. Thank you all so much for listening to part 1 of the debut episode of The Fifth Factor, hosted by David Lee and Ahmed Jama. I have absolutely loved starting this whole process with Ahmed. I think you all are really going to enjoy part 2 as well. While we went really deep and really granular on Kingston Flemings and Hannes Steinbach, part 2 covers so many different guys. I mean, we talk about pretty much everyone of note. There's a Tyler Tanner deep dive. We look at some of AJ DeBonta's compelling idiosyncrasies, some RSCI surprises and disappointments. Braylon Mullins gets a deep dive as well. Then I defend one of my favorite clients who's a bit controversial in the analytics draft community. We also have some asides about Bennett Sturts and Michael Brown, and then also just contextualize how good this class is relative to history. Awesome conversation. I really hope if you enjoyed part 1, you'll love part 2. Again, all of our information will be in the description. I have dropped my website as the time of this outro recording, not the time of the recording of the entire episode. So please check it out in the description. Check out Ahmed's work. Check out my work. And yeah, man, this will only get better from here. Thank you all so much for supporting. Hopefully I'll see you in part 2.